Good morning, LinkedIn. Happy Monday. Welcome to Let's Build Daily. I'm your host, Chris Carolan. Maybe we need like a Monday musings theme so I can just get these types of topics off my mind or start the conversation around them. Um, Yesterday, I posted about, you know, a little bit about what's behind my thoughts on trust but verify. And I love talking about and thinking about stuff like this. Probably a little too much. Um, but I think like adages like this and assumptions that this adage is making are at the heart of why we don't have CRM adoption, why digital transformation sucks, you know, because at the end of the day, we need trust in our system and our processes and our relationships. And we need verification that things are happening well, that they're happening correctly, that they're happening efficiently, effectively, whatever word you want to use. And that statement inherently, focuses on one or the other, or one versus the other, but inherently uh, presents something in contrast to whatever came before it. So literally, the idea is I trust you, but I need to verify to make sure. And while that sounds great on the surface, from a human perspective, it inherently says you don't trust me. Like whether we want it to or not, that's what it says. Right. And yesterday I shared the story, which, I'll have a few to share to talk about why I feel the need to speak on this throughout all the different, seasons of my life that I've experienced it. But, in college, and at this point I had worked in a movie theater. I started when I was 16 and had been in movie theater for a few years, and had this manager that hated when we would recount any stack of bills that he would give us. So if you're in charge of the cashier drawer, that means it has to reconcile at the end of the shift if we're going to use business, accounting terms. Not a dollar over, not a dollar under, not a penny over, not a penny under. So you count it at the start of the shift. You count it at the end of the shift. Sometimes there's mid-shift counts if it's a long day and, on the weekend and super busy, right? Sometimes you're writing stuff down. Sometimes you need change quick. And, the manager brings it to you. And no matter how much you trust the manager, if that count is off at the end of the shift, initially it's on you. So if you don't recount that and it turns off that as the mechanism to cause your drawer to be off, that's on you, not on the person you're supposed to be trusting. Now, I had a pretty good relationship with his manager, so I had no problems doing it in front of him, no matter how mad he got at me. But when I thought about it a little more, it's like, what about the new person? What about the person who doesn't know this manager well? Maybe they've already had an infraction and they're worried about their standing. So they're going to just say, okay, I trust you. Right. Under the pressure. But when that's off at the end of the shift, it's still their responsibility. So the verification needs to happen, whether there's trust or not. Like at the end of the day, verification is completely, not related to whether there's trust or not. It's got to happen. And at this level, this is like the smallest, micro level of like process integrity and process validation verification, right? At a small movie theater, you know, I might only had like $100 in sales, right? So small peanuts, right? But the amount of work, let's say I trust him and it turns out to be off, right? Initially, it's on me. The overall reconciliation of all the cash that day is on the manager. So usually stuff like that is caught at the end of the day, right? But when it's a busy day, lots of drawers moving, thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars changing hands, it becomes a little bit different. Um, and when you keep going that way and you talk about the scale of millions of dollars and millions of transactions over the course of days, weeks, months, that creates a lot of unnecessary cost and waste in the business, whether it's, time, whether it's effort, whether it's stress, anxiety, actual dollars and cents. And I like to dig into it just because there are a lot of underlying reasons we haven't solved for yet, obviously, when we have CRM adoption rates the way they are, when people just hear the word HubSpot or Salesforce and they're like, no, not interested. That's not me. I do my own thing. I have my own process. I'm not here to play. Okay. You put it in. Okay. I'll add some things. I'll make it look like I'm using it. Right. But at the end of the day, that's not going to help me. Let's say as a salesperson in this case, it's not going to help me do my job. So I'm only doing it because someone is requiring me to do it. And while we might not say trust but verify as we deliver this, that's the feeling, because if you don't tell me otherwise and don't prove to me otherwise and don't behave otherwise, I don't trust you in that you're just not trying to watch what I'm doing so that you can, correct me or fix my mistakes or, big brother the hell out of me. Right? That's super real in terms of why people don't use CRM. So when we're an admin and we require all these fields and, the manager or executive asks for a report and we don't know why, we don't know what decisions are going to be made off this report. But we just put it in there and then see that the salesperson needs to add another piece of data. And then we wonder why data management is hard and data gets dirty and the cleanliness. It's just a system that's not built to operate or even stand a chance at success. In between these, so now let's say I'm in the world of customer relationship management. In between, I spent a lot of time with materials analysis and having to make materials that created data that people could trust so that when they test their unknowns, let's say the gasoline coming out of the pipeline or the crude oil or wherever it is in the supply chain, they've got to be able to test that unknown and trust that data. But they cannot trust the data until they have verified that their system is working. And those are the materials that we made so that they could validate and verify the process that they were using was giving good data. Therefore, if you bring an unknown, you can probably trust the data, right? That's where, verifying the technology used to supervise the process of manufacturing, the process of production, right? You're switching gears there. so that we have to validate and verify our technology in our process over here, so that we can bring an unknown, test that sample, and if that checks out, now we are verifying the production process, right? That we're getting good outcomes. Now, over the years, there's been, depending on whether you're in metals or fuels or all these different material industries, whether or not you use those check samples or those things that are validating and verifying your system is all over the place. It's very inconsistent. People aren't trained on the why or what behind it. But that was where I was first introduced to this phrase in principle, in that you want to trust that your teammate or your neighbor or the process is built to do things correctly, knows how to do things correctly, knows how to give you a good handoff. But at the end of the day, if your system breaks because of bad materials, or if the plant explodes, or if all these bad things happen, that's on the person who's supposed to be trusting the person ahead of them, right? So we had these situations where fuels testing got very, very process and verification oriented with the help of EPA and Exxon, kind of driving things. But then we still have, the metal supply chain, whereas, and this is where all these, standardized test methods and all this committee, work every 6 months, every 1 year, every 2 years, that's where they come into play to kind of drive these specifications that people can adhere to say, okay, a consensus group agreed that this is the current best way to do something. If I follow that process, I will get this data. And as long as it's matching, the group or, the intended outcome, I have validated my process and I could trust the process, right? So it's more of a yes and situation, right? Not, it'd be pretty easy to say validate or verify to trust. But at that point, we're saying flat out, I don't trust you at all. So I need to verify so that I can trust you. That's not a situation we want to present either. Because at the end of the day, I think most of these problems are related to interpersonal communication and relationships, right? Most of the time, we're asking somebody else to do something for us or for the team that they may not have had to do before. And if they're not clear on the why, or it's presented to them as if there's risk at all, and if I think it's Big Brother or some other case where there might be risk if I do this thing, I'm much less likely to do it. And I'm especially less likely to do it the way that you want me to do it, which is why the admin counterpoint is requiring fields, requiring stages, requiring all this, as if that's a solution to the problem. And while it might give us better data, it doesn't necessarily help with adoption, right? So if adoption is the problem, requiring all these steps in the process is not always the answer. It's usually not the answer. So in the material space, you have things like, EPA Tier 3 that, requires statistical quality control and requires data management, requires these validation and verification practices in order to, kind of prove that your system of data, that your data, measurement system is working, so that when you tell me that data proves your production process is working, right? Now we can trust the whole system, but not without these verification data points. Similarly, on the metals, AS 9100, I think it's called, is related to aviation. And it used to be where you could get, let's say, a batch of a thousand units, let's say metal rods or something, right? Or fabricated pieces. And I would only have to test 10% of the batch to say, okay, everything in this batch is up to spec, right? Because when you're talking different types of steel, aluminum, other metals, the alloy grade and the composition of it can be the difference between a plane, staying in the air or not staying in the air. And that's a big deal. So at some point they decided 10% of the batch was not enough and they've gone to 100%, right? So if you want to sell to one of the big boys, you've got to be willing to prove 100% of your batch is good. That is a far far away place from where we used to say, okay, you just got a piece of paper to show me. Okay, I see the piece of paper, right? I trust you, right? That's not good enough in a lot of spots. And you can imagine why, because these are the kinds of materials made that when things go wrong, spaceships explode on launch. There's a good SpaceX story that I can share below after the show. This is what causes plants, refineries to explode, chemical processing plants to catch on fire, planes to malfunction, plane parts to malfunction, right? All this stuff, a lot of it relates to materials either coming in or being maintained, during the process. So that's why all these people responsible for maintenance and management of the process can't focus on trust. They cannot prioritize trust by itself, right? So not only does it, like, human behavior, like, not agree with trust but verify, does not intake it the way that we want it, but the systems that we're putting in place, the systems that we're building, also really don't care about trust. It's verify, validate, show me, prove it with your system, not with your relationship, with your vendor, your partner. I don't care about that. I care that you have a system in place that's working, right? And when it comes to customer relationship management and customer data and customer communications, we can get there. We just have to start positioning this stuff differently, I think. And that is verify and trust. It's like, we are all verifying this system. These verification needs to be put in place so that we all win, so that we can give you the support that you need when something is wrong, right? This whole mindset of admin versus sales or admin versus marketing, which exists, whether we want it to or not, whether we recognize it or not, will always prevent CRM adoption and tech adoption for that matter, right? Why would I go into a system of record doing things the way you want them to be done because I didn't ask for this system and I have my Outlook inbox and my Excel sheet that has been working for 20 years? And my process works. I know the data is good. I prove it by crushing my sales numbers, every quarter. That's where it needs to be. It needs to be more than you need to come in here so that we can see what you're doing. so that we can get the data, so that we, right? And the trust but verify mindset supports that, right? Because we'll say, we trust that your process works. We just need it in here so that we can verify. At that point, it's like, okay, it's completely for you, not for me. Instead, if you come in and show us the data, and we can verify it against other stuff, we can help you with the close rates. We can help you with the win rates. We can help you highlight stuff. Maybe you want the quoting process to go a little faster for you, right? Now we can highlight for you where the trust needs to go both ways, and the people quoting need this information. And if they're having to get it from you via email or via your spreadsheet in a different way from everybody else, that causes friction. And that's why you're not getting the quotes, exactly the way you want. Just one example, right? But we have to figure out, and I'm a big proponent of the yes and, framework from improv, where it's like, well, how can we build on what's been done? Yes, you are a fantastic sales guy that crush it. You crush it every quarter, right? How do we help those around you, crush it as well, so that as an organization, everybody grows and you get the products you want, you get the product development that you want, you get the margins that you want, you get the paycheck that you want, right? I think overcoming old adages like this, trust but verify, without having to, re-educate on the whole thing. It's like, hey, if we haven't tried that before, maybe that's a new avenue we can take to helping explain the importance of this stuff to the people who don't appreciate what the CRM can do, what a customer communication management platform like HubSpot can do. We've got to try different things, folks. Like, and that's what scares me about as HubSpot expands into enterprise right now. The thing that's been holding them back, one of the things is, user permissions and the customized permissions everywhere, so that we can protect everybody from themselves and from the rest of the business. And it's because we don't trust users. We don't trust users to use the system the way that we want. So instead of training everybody and taking, a viewpoint of empowerment, especially in a tool like HubSpot, where you should want to empower people before you put all these walls around them. The empowerment is where the magic happens, right? That's where you keep up with the platform. When everybody's empowered to explore it, explore the process, try something new every now and then to get to the same, endpoint, right? You're not going to break the system. You lose all that. And again, I understand the need for consistent process, especially in a world where it's got to be verified a very specific way, right? So I guess I'm just looking to hear feedback on, how you guys view, or if there's any other like phrases like this or things you could maybe reposition, talk about the nuance of what's being said, right? Because this is the hard part of marketing, right? We've got to overcome this like 30-year-old, 40-year-old, adage, at least 40 years in terms of like American, American culture, right? since Reagan started saying it. And we got to flip it on its head, right? And there's stuff like this. I firmly believe it's getting in the way of transformation, uh, tech adoption, and ultimately in the way of the customer experience that you need to provide as a business. So share your thoughts. Very interested to hear. Where am I wrong on this? Am I overcomplicating it? Would love to hear your feedback. But until then, think about this phrase. Think about how you build trust in a world of verification at every step. Find that opportunity and let's grow. Have a great week, everybody.